Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and we have a rather large bombshell interview done with Michael Baden, the pathologist, who on behalf of Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, carried out that independent autopsy on behalf of his family. Now, this is the first time I've seen an in-depth interview with the guy, and obviously the big headline here is he says it points to homicide, not suicide, which is a huge revelation. But really the details are much bigger. So he goes on Fox and Friends, and because of that, we're going to break down the majority of this this video. But what are some of the highlights, other than the fact that he says it points to homicide, not suicide? One, he alleges that the first suicide attempt was not a suicide attempt and that he was attacked. Okay? And he does point the finger, although not naming the name, to Tartiglione, who was the ex-cop he was a cellmate with. Okay, that's kind of not being highlighted in the media. Two, they do talk about the accomplices in this and the possibility that their lives are in danger. Three, Baden says in all of his years at the very end that he has never, let me repeat this, never seen the types of breaks in the throat of anybody that committed suicide. It's always, let me repeat that, always been homicide. Now, this guy is a high-profile attorney, or not attorney, I'm sorry, coroner. Excuse my mistake there. And he has been involved in many, many other cases as a pathologist, Attica being one of them, which he brings up. There are so many small and little revelations here from, Mark Epstein doing this, from the fact that the Department of Justice never contacted him. This is 3 months later, and Baden says he was never even contacted by them in the investigation. He talks about the possibility of DNA under Epstein's fingernails. So what we're going to do, and by the way, this coincides with my information that Baden's assistant, I was told this by a friend, was there, and that Jeffrey Epstein is dead, and that it pointed to homicide. Remember I said that. Remember in that first week I said, look, I have a personal friend who, has known this girl since high school. I shouldn't even say that it was a girl, but if you guys want to look into my information, and she stated that her boss had done the autopsy and it pointed to homicide. Now, he's very adamant about this in this interview. So without further ado, we're going to start playing it.
He's a forensic pathologist, Fox News contributor, and joins us right now for an exclusive interview. Dr. Baden, thanks for being here.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
When did you realize that the Epstein family needed help?
Well, I was asked by the brother, the next of kin, to be at the autopsy. And at the autopsy on day one, there were findings that were unusual for suicidal hanging and more consistent with ligature homicidal strangulation.
All right, let's stop. Ligature, homicidal strangulation. So he's starting to talk about the fibers, that it would take to choke somebody from behind. And remember, Epstein himself, we were all led to believe that first time was a suicide, but later on he's going to talk about it being an attack and not a suicide. He does seem to get confused at one point. And this is a somewhat cookie-cutter style interview, but it is in-depth in the sense it's 10 minutes, and he does get to say a lot.
Which included...
And it was suggested at the time that he committed suicide by doing what?
By hanging. At the time he was found allegedly hanging by a homemade ligature of sheets.
Are you saying you don't think it was suicide?
I think that the evidence points toward homicide rather than suicide.
Why?
Because there are multiple 3 fractures in the hyoid bone, the thyroid cartilage, that are very unusual for suicide and more indicative of strangulation, homicidal strangulation.
Now let's stop. He says this unusual, but I want to reiterate that during the end of the interview, he says in his entire career, he has never seen that, not once, with suicide.
Let's take a look at what the medical examiner stated. After careful review of all the investigative information, including complete autopsy findings, the determination on the death of Epstein is below. Cause, hanging, manner, suicide. You say that his fatal injuries are consistent with homicide?
More consistent with homicide. And in fact, at the time of the autopsy, the doctor doing the autopsy didn't think there was enough information to say suicide, so she put it pending further study.
So let's stop that. That is correct. In the very beginning, she did say pending further study after that initial information was gathered. Now he's going to talk about some of the other forensic evidence that he was never able to see, but would have led investigators on a separate path.
And then for some reason, and they want to know, the family wants to know, why was it changed from pending further study to homicide afterwards?
So if you're there watching them perform this autopsy, you notice these 3 broken bones, and you believe it would be homicide. So that would mean another person would have gone into his cell, strangled him. Did he have any signs of trying to fight back?
Well, they took fingernail clippings to see if there's anybody else's DNA on it. And
so now we know that, again, they took fingernail scrapings, and yet he didn't get access to them, and they've never talked about those results in public.
that hasn't been released. Neither has the information about whose DNA is on the ligature.
So when he's talking about the ligature, he's talking about the strangulation device.
A ligature was made out of torn strips of orange sheets, and whoever made it had to have a lot of DNA on it. And the brother's been asking that from day one.
So wait a second. So you're saying that whoever made it has to have a lot of DNA on it, and there was?
No, we don't even know if it was examined.
Could they? Right. So you're saying when you left the examination room, they weren't sure what happened.
That's right.
So what? You know this procedure. What happened in the interim to get this such a blunt conclusion?
Let me just stop. So you notice he says that basically the homicide weapon, right? Because he's saying that this is consistent, more consistent with a homicide. But at the end, he'll say again, he's never seen these type of breaks in a suicide. And now we have the murder weapon or the cause of death, whatever you want to call it. You have no idea where that went. You have no idea who has the forensic DNA evidence under his fingernails.
Well, a week later, it was changed to homicide. The brother wants to know, what did they get new in that week to make it homicide?
What's your answer to that?
We don't know. We don't know. It's 80 days now.
Right.
And the brother feels he's getting a runaround. And to add to it, there was a total breakdown in security.
So now he's going to talk about the fact that none of the cameras worked. Again, imagination land if you think that happened, without some help. I'm not saying that they didn't get taken down, but it didn't just magically occur. And not one, but two separate security guards aren't there.
The video cameras didn't work. The guards went to sleep.
What about that guy who was in the cell with him earlier, where it was suggested that that guy tried to kill him?
Well, he had a new...
So again, now he's talking about Nicholas Tartiglione, the ex-cop who's alleged to have killed multiple people in a homicide drug deal gone wrong. Remember, Tartiglione also somehow had a miniature cell phone in that cell prior to Epstein getting there. They found him there, and was involved in another assault a year beforehand.
New roommate now, because of a suicide watch, a different roommate, but that roommate was pulled away the day or two before, so that there was no roommate with him, no suicide watch, no security guards.
So again, he says that Tartiglione was no longer his roommate. He was given another roommate, but that person was pulled away from him. He was taken off a suicide watch. There are no cameras, no security guards.
No videotapes that were working. Was the FBI able to get some information
Dr. Bodden,
from the videos?
I know that you were hired back in the 70s to do this as your job. You really investigated deaths in prisons after the big riot and all these prisoners died. So in your experience, what are the chances of him not being checked on for 3 hours from 3:30 to 6:30 when they found his body, and the two prison guards falling asleep?
Extremely unlikely. I've never...
Extremely unlikely. And he's about to say he's never seen it before. And again, she's addressing Attica, where he was brought in by Nelson Rockefeller.
I've seen it in 50 years of investigating all deaths that occur in prisons in New York State. Never had two guards fall asleep at the same time. All the video doesn't work. And the issue would be, did somebody come in and cause his death?
Well, what about the suggestion you may be biased because you were hired by the family?
That's always a situation, except that Governor Rockefeller, after Attica in 71, set up a special board to look into all deaths in prisons in New York State because the concern that police, medical examiners and guards were biased when the inmates complained that deaths were being covered up.
And of course they were being covered up. Prison is a crooked place. Prison is a corrupt place. And we should have had guards all over him. There should have been literal cameras inside of his cell. But the system's not set up that way for a reason. And what he's talking about is even the corruption back in the 70s, okay, 60s, 70s, 80s, it continues today, to cover up deaths that were caused by guards and others. Don't think they didn't protect some of the prisoners there as well. Don't think there isn't organized crime hits in prison. And now it looks like we've got a high-level one, don't we?
We have a separate board that looks into all these deaths.
Dr. Bond, what I don't understand is if everybody wants the same thing, the truth, the brother shouldn't...
Not everybody wants the same thing. You know this. Come on. This is why Fox and Friends is pretty trash.
...be fighting anything. They should be interviewing you and saying, wait, tell me about what you have. Have people investigating this case prior to them ruling it a suicide contacted you?
Not at all.
None. Do you find that strange?
Yes. If the Attorney General is investigating the cause of death, as they're doing the security of this issue, in this issue, somebody should have been investigating everybody who had anything to do with the autopsy. Sure.
Common sense. But don't worry. Bill Barr assured us that all the evidence he saw said Epstein committed suicide. Move along. And notice no one else has been arrested. Ghislaine Maxwell, Brunel, and others are on the run. Okay, others that have been named, Kaylin, Groff. Remember, we actually had somebody deceased. We had a new victim come out and name 2 names, one deceased, one still living. These are very real people.
So if there was a prisoner that went in and strangled him and the DNA is on that, whatever
ligature,
he used, the ligature, the sheets, the bed sheets, then wouldn't it be easy to track down who that person was?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the first thing. The medical examiner at the time of the first autopsy did swabs of all the clothing on him for DNA. But who had the ligature?
Well, who has that information? Why isn't that being released?
That's what the brother wants to know.
So
that's why
No, exactly. I mean, they're asking rudimentary questions. What they should be saying is, are you saying the Department of Justice has all this and they're covering it up? You're saying you saw them collect all of this evidence and it was never shared with you and you were never interviewed in a follow-up as to say why you believe those 3 broken bones point to homicide and not suicide. But on this interview, you'll say you've never seen it in your 30-plus years, 50-plus years?
asked me to come here.
So you're calling on the state to figure out whose DNA is on that?
Not the state, unfortunately. This is a federal prison, so the state has not. The FBI usually investigates, would be investigating it, and the brother wants to know, 1, did the FBI get a hold of that ligature?
Of course.
And 2, it only takes a couple of days to do the DNA. What's the results?
Dr. Bodden, I know you're just somebody who looks at a situation, cut and dry. I'm looking at DNA, looking at hard facts. How important in your investigation and conclusion is his mindset prior to suicide?
Now we're going to talk about, the possibility that, he really wanted to take his own life. And this is where he reveals that the first incident he believes was an attack and not a suicide attempt.
And the fact that he had plans afterwards and that he spent so much time with his lawyers the day before.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The great majority of people commit suicide give warning signs ahead. Now, one of the warning signs could have been the incident July 23rd when he said the roommate assaulted him and the guard said it was a suicide attempt.
So now, this is the first time I've heard anybody make this claim, lawyers or otherwise, but he's saying for sure that Epstein said he was attacked and it was the guards that said it was a suicide attempt.
And they should have been watching him.
Sure.
They didn't watch him. According to the guards, according to his lawyers at that time, he was in good mood. He was hoping that he was still waiting for a decision whether he can get out on bail. That hadn't come yet.
Well, he had so many victims. I think the victims really deserve to know what happened.
You're absolutely right. There are a lot of things happened, but also the brother is concerned that if he was murdered, then other people who have information might be at risk.
Now he's talking about, the accomplices or the witnesses.
Jeopardy.
Look, the heart doesn't go out with this guy. This guy seems like just a terrible person. Used his power and manipulation ability for evil means. I get it. But there are so many people who are implicated in his web of ugliness. You wonder if this plays a role. The powerful people that his antics affected and would have been affected had he lived.
Well, since you're not doing your job in the media, and you're not talking about, George Mitchell, Glenn Dubin, Richardson, ex-Governor Richardson, since you're not focusing on that, since you're not focusing on Maxwell and the network and Brunel and other people that need to be brought to justice, you're allowing for the opportunity something like this happen again. You should be pressing hard.
You're absolutely right, and that's one of the things that the brother thinks as well. If they think he has information that his life would be in jeopardy.
What does the brother tell you? What does he think happened?
He thinks he wants to find the answer to it. And he thinks that his brother wasn't the type to commit suicide, but he'd like to get the information that he hasn't been able to get so far.
How hard is it to commit suicide in prison?
Very easy. But first, in this situation, if he took the sheets and stripped it, it would have taken a good half hour or hour to make the ligature, then to go up there.
So let's talk about the ligature. This isn't him just like tying or folding a sheet. It looks like he ripped these things up. So now you're talking about, he's going to tell you, like a 25, 30-minute process.
Hanging, it's about 5 minutes or so that you can be near dead.
Dr. Bodden, though, if the supposition is that it was a homicide, that would mean cops were in on it. Who opened the door, who moved the cameras, all of that stuff.
Was it someone on the outside or was it inside job?
That's right.
That's a terrible allegation.
It's a terrible allegation. That's a terrible allegation. I just can't even believe that instead we're supposed to believe that everything failed and there is nobody in on it. This is why Fox and Friends is trash. This is why the mainstream media is trash. First of all, to have it take almost 3 months for this guy to say this, again, there were the headlines that it was more consistent with homicide, but not to the extent that he's reporting. And he's also reporting that Epstein was attacked the first time and shouldn't even really have been on suicide watch.
Well, why were the two guards asleep? In 50 years of looking at deaths in New York State, and occasionally a guard falls asleep. Never two guards at the same time.
50 years, two guards at the same time, never seen it.
The cell, the camera in the cell watching didn't work. The camera in the hallway to see if anybody came in and out of his cell didn't work.
That's 2 separate cameras.
This is bizarre. That his roommate was taken away, so he's all by himself. Suicide watch was taken away. So, yeah, the issue you bring up has to be investigated. Doesn't mean that this was a homicide, but certainly it deserves investigation. And the brother's concerned there is no investigation.
Have you ever seen anyone that committed suicide and was hanging themselves with those 3 broken bones?
No.
There it is right there. Have you ever seen someone hanging themselves, committing suicide with those 3 broken bones? No.
Hanging does not cause these broken bones, and homicide does. Usually 2 bones, even 3 is a huge amount of pressures.
Usually 2. So a third one would be a huge amount of pressure.
Was applied.
And how different is all this for anyone, let alone a high-profile prison?
There were 800 other people in the correction facility, and most of them would have liked him to get their hands on him. 1, because he had sexual things. 2, because to make a name for themselves. 3, because somebody could put him up to it. You're right, though. A number of people had to be involved if this was a homicide.
Okay.
There it is. Of course, a number of people were involved. So there you have it, guys. A lot of different revelations. Take it with a grain of salt. He's been involved in a lot of high profile autopsies and investigations for sure. I'm not saying you should take everything as gospel, but coming out almost 3 months later, there is a lot of information there. I do want to say props to my old boss and buddy, Luke Radowski, and also Jeff Berwick, the dollar vigilante, for getting on Epstein's Island. Watch the video, incredible stuff. Stuff that, nobody else is doing. So please support those guys. Just a really great job. I can't say enough what a great job that is. If you like this video and you're not subscribed, now's the time to thumbs it up, share it with others, subscribe to the Burmese Brigade. We're doing it, 3 to 7 times a day. Every once in a while, I've taken some time off recently, but on subjects that matter. Tulsi standing with the 9/11 families, calling for Saudi Arabia's involvement to be revealed to the public finally, and for the family members to move forward. Big news there. Mainstream media not covering it. I am going to be doing an in-depth dive on the finders. I got to reading it last night, and I said, you know what, I need to read more before I do that first video. I've already done an interview with Derek Brose about it months ago. You can check that out here. And all of my documentary films, by the way, Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, and Shade the Motion Picture are available free right here in the playlist section, so please go check them out, and I'm doing it with your help. I'm hoping we can at least get to the $3,000 mark before tomorrow on the 1st. I will start Media Month 5, but that means we've been doing it for 4 months on our own, bringing you news that matters, that's not about left or right, but about right and wrong. So I want to thank you guys so much for that support, and I will see you all on the flip side.